I'm Dr. Larry Kilmar, Vice President of Animal Science and Conservation, and welcome to Wildlife at Tampa's Lowry Park Zoo. We're here at the sloth exhibit this morning. I'm with Tracy, and we just recently received a new sloth bear as part of the species survival program. Now, in our last segment, we were talking about black bears. Well, this bear is related to sloth bears, but they have some very interesting physiological differences. One of them is that they're missing their mid-molars, as they say, and have a very long snout because they prefer to eat insects, believe it or not. That's one of their primary diets. So, Tracy, you take care of these two animals every day. What's our diet for our sloth bears?
The diet is mainly protein-based. We give them fruit every day, as well as a little bit of honey here and there. Mainly they are omnivores. They eat a lot of insects, termites, ants, will eat fruit in the wild, and apparently they will eat carrion occasionally.
Yeah, the documents say that. Now, when this animal was first described, they thought it actually was related to the sloth, the animal that occurs in South America, because it can climb trees and because of these large claws that it has. But it actually is part of the bear family, a very unique individual in the bear family, to say the least. So we just received this male, and you've been trying to introduce him to his girlfriend, and that's been a challenge. Give us some of the things you've had to go through to get the two of those two together.
Well, first of all, Annie is not very receptive when it's not breeding season, so there have been some scuffles. We have to monitor that, do a lot of behavior watches. This week, actually, Annie is receptive and Ken is not, so there are still some scuffles happening.
Well, there was a very short breeding season and produced one, maybe two cubs. Rarely has a third cub ever been identified, by science anyway, as having been produced. So, very unique animal. It's a big, hairy animal. It's hard to tell how big it really is, but how big was, his name's Ken, the male we got. How big was he when he arrived?
He weighed in at 240.
240 pounds. They can get in excess, the males can get in excess of 400 pounds, but it's hard to tell with all that hair. Now, here's an animal that lives in not only in Sri Lanka, the Sri Lankan sloth bear, but also the more common one lives in the mainland of India. So you can imagine all this hair in this very hot, humid climate, but they do quite well, and that's why they do so well here in Tampa. Anything unique about managing these animals?
Unique. They're very intelligent. When they don't want to shift anywhere, they won't. No matter the coercion. We do training with our older male, female. We're working on training with Ken as far as shifting goes. Getting along with the intros, that's been a challenge.
Yeah, you don't realize what goes on behind the scenes to have two animals, a male and a female in this case, on exhibit. There's a lot of work because it has to be very carefully programmed so that the animals don't get injured. There's always going to be some scuffling, of course, but timing is everything when it comes to these kinds of introductions. Now, Ken was sent to us because he's an important animal in the species survival program. We also have an important female, so what we're hoping for is that we can perpetuate this species as part of the species survival plan for that 90% genetic variability over 100 years. So it's well worth all the energy that we put into this. And one last question, Tracy. I forgot how old Ken is.
He's 14 years old.
Okay, so 14. He's still a young boy in many senses. Now, one last note. These bears were used for many, many years as entertainment in India. They were actually kept on chains and moved from village to village, and people would gain revenue off of that by watching the bears. That has been eliminated for the most part. Very interesting process. The Indian government has said no longer are we going to do this, and special interest groups have come in and rescued these bears. Now, what do you do with a bear that's been in that situation from birth? There's a whole group now of sloth bears that'll live out their life in very excellent reserves and areas that have been on the street and in a training situation. No longer valuable in a breeding situation, but at least they will have a good life for the rest of their time. And it's important to understand that these kinds of activities that have been started for centuries really are a detriment to a species like this. They should no longer be trained and chained, used as entertainment. Here in Tampa, we're working to try to save this very vulnerable species, protect it, and perpetuate it for the years to come. Next time you're at Lowry Park, go past the tiger exhibit. The next exhibit on your left will be the sloth bear exhibit. We're here at the Orang exhibit, and we've just received a new male, again, as part of our SSP programs. His name is Goyang, and you can see him in the background here. He's a 13-year-old male. We're pretty happy to have him, actually, because he's going to be our new breeding male. And Lowry Park has always had a great history of reproduction of orangs, and so that's now going to continue with his arrival. And I'm here with Amy, who's tossing some food to him to get him to come over closer to us. But this has been a rather interesting introduction with a new male, because we haven't had a new male for quite some time.
Yes, since we had Rango that passed away last year, it's just been the girls. So we were really excited to get him and kind of add that other dynamic to the group. And it's always kind of scary. You don't know exactly what's going to happen. You don't know if they're going to get along or whatnot. So, but it's gone really well, and we're just happy to have him here. And the kids have played with him. They have little wrestling sessions, and so yeah, it's just pretty cool to see him out there. He's pretty impressive. So
you can see on his face he has what are called flanges, and that's actually an indicator of an adult, full adult male. And that's there's a lot of theory as to what those flanges mean, but the females are certainly attracted to older males who have these flanges. They will breed with younger males, but the older males are obviously what the females are looking for. So that's actually a signal. It's an identifier to the females that this is an adult male. A male will breed several females in a troop at any given time. And with our troop now, how many adult females do we have?
We have 2 adult females and 2 juvenile females.
So the chances of him breeding these females is very high, and again, brought to us because of his genetic importance to our population. Now, this animal lived in a northern zoo, and because northern zoos have some restrictions when it comes to weather conditions with a subtropical animal like this, he basically lived inside a great, large geodesic dome. So when he got here, his first experience with thunder, lightning, and rain was his first. He had never had any opportunity to feel rain. And so it's been quite interesting watching him in this transition from that zoo down here. But it's been taking you, what, a couple of months now to get him introduced, and also to the silvered langurs, which is another species we have in the exhibit.
Yeah, so it took him a little bit of time. We wanted him to go at his own pace, because you come out and it's a big open air exhibit, the sunlight and the Florida heat, and the wind and the rain. So that was one thing. So we wanted him to, kind of get acclimated and go at his own pace. And now he loves it. He doesn't even, he just stays out there, and he's, gotten really comfortable. And then the langurs, also, he had never been with any other species besides the orangs before. So that was another hurdle. But that went really well. So we're just really happy.
So what kind of interesting stories about the introduction would you like to tell us about?
Well, let's see. He was really a big fan of Josie. She's pretty feisty, so he kind of follows her around a lot. With the langurs, Shawsey, our male langur, was pretty upset when Goyang came out and was vocalizing at him. But now you'll see him sitting side by side, so that's pretty cool. But just seeing the little ones and, the big male playing and stuff, we teared up the first time we saw it. So
now, how much did he weigh when he arrived, and then what's a daily diet for him?
He is 295, so he's a really big boy. They get lots of different, variety of fruits and vegetables, greens. We'll cut browse from around the zoo like oak and bamboo. So yeah, just a lot of romaine, spinach. It changes, so we like to give them a lot of variety. So just things like bananas, sweet potatoes, carrots, just things like that. So.
Now, there are 2 subspecies of orangs, Borneans and Sumatrans. The Borneans, there's many more Borneans than there are Sumatrans, but both are considered critically endangered, mostly because of habitat destruction. Now you see how big he is. I mean, he's a very tall, lanky boy, but that's, again, very, very typical. But again, back to their status, a lot of this has to do with habitat destruction and loss. And while some of that's coming under control, the animals are still in risk of extinction. So we have to be careful. We have to be ever mindful. Again, this is the largest great ape of Asia. Again, not to confuse yourself with gorillas that live in Africa. It was the largest great ape of Asia, and we've got to do everything we can to save this animal. Next time you're at Lowry Park, stop by and see our new boy Goyang in the orang exhibit. We're here with Kristen and one of our newest African penguins. And Kristen, how old is this chick?
She was born on May 8th, so she actually hatched.
And so parents take care of them for a certain period of time, and then as in the wild, the chicks go off by themselves, learn how to swim, learn how to be big penguins. So at what point do we remove them from the parents?
We took her at about 3 weeks of age, or just about a month old. And then we will hand raise her from there. So we actually fed her about 3 or 4 times a day. And then she starts getting her waterproof feather here. She still has a little bit left here. You can tell it's kind of wet right now though because she took a bath. But so once she has her waterproof feathers, we'll actually put her into the big pool and teach her how to swim. And then slowly we will introduce her to the rest of the colony. And then she'll be out there for the rest of her time.
We're in front of the exhibit now. So Kristen, let's talk about how we integrate, or how you integrate that chick back into the main colony.
All right, first we'll actually teach her to swim in that smaller pool that we saw her earlier, and then we'll bring in her over here by herself, and we'll slowly teach her to get used to this pool and know that she's more comfortable in the water. And then eventually we'll actually keep her out here for a few hours and have keepers watch her all the time. And we actually set up kind of a playpen area for her so that the other penguins don't have direct access to her, but she can still see them and they can interact through each other. And then eventually we'll take that away and she'll be out here for good.
Because chicks in the wild they stay by themselves anyway for a period of time. So this is just mimicking what happens in the wild. Now this is an endangered species, recently upgraded to endangered, and people wonder oftentimes why you have penguins in Tampa. It's so hot and warm and humid. Well, they actually come from the same environment in South Africa, correct?
Correct. These guys like about 65 to 85 degrees. So the Florida climate's really good for them.
Yeah, they do quite well. And in the last global warming period, all the small penguins moved north, and the African penguins moved to South Africa, and the fairy penguin, which is actually smaller than this penguin, moved off Ecuador. So that's as far north as they've come. All the larger penguins were able to handle the cold temperatures and stay down south, and you've seen them in many films where they all huddle together. Smaller penguins just can't generate that kind of heat, so they had to move out of there in order to survive. So I understand in the 70s there was a huge oil spill off the South African coast, and actually this has now become the largest rescue rehab of species, because about 19,000 sitting on nests, and then another 19,000 they thought were in fear of being damaged. So almost 40,000 penguins were rescued by the South African government, and a lot of them had to be de-oiled to protect this very valuable bird. So they look sweet and nice, but they're a little nippy, aren't they?
They are. They can definitely, they pack a punch sometimes. They have all their different personalities. They all have different attitudes, and different attitudes towards different keepers and different people as well. So you have to get to learn who's who and who you can tolerate and things like that.
You feed them individually, so you know exactly what each bird is getting, right? And what is their diet?
They guys eat a few different kinds of fish. Here at the zoo we give them herring, mackerel, capelin, sardines, as well as squid. But our penguins are very, very picky, and most of them actually do not like the squid. We have a few that were raised on squid, so they will eat it, but most of them will not. But we try. Also in the wild they would eat crustaceans as well, so small crustaceans.
And does this penguin chick have a name?
She does. Her name is Topanga.
Topanga. So the next time you're at the zoo, right across from the carousel, stop in and see Topanga. One of our newest arrivals are the Orinoco crocodiles. This is a highly critically endangered species that we've added now to our collection. We're very, very fortunate to have them come into our collection. I'm with Sean today, who takes care of these animals. And any interesting challenges in bringing these animals in and acclimating them to their new exhibit?
One of the most challenging things really has been making sure everybody's getting the right amount of food. That's usually a critical thing when you have multiple animals in an exhibit, and especially since they came from 2 different zoos. We had a few that came from Dallas and one that came from San Antonio. So our big challenge was getting them introduced first, make sure there was no aggression, and then to start the feeding process from there.
These animals number less than 600. Range countries are Colombia, Venezuela, on the Orinoco River, and associated tributaries. So it's a very close population, to say the least. And we're doing everything we can in captivity to help bolster those numbers. Now, this is supposedly, I'm reading that this is the largest predator in the Americas. So that'd be North America, Central America, and South America. So these animals behind us are going to get a lot bigger. What's the average size that we'll see on these?
Well, we have 4 females here, and typically we're looking somewhere around 9 to 11 feet on females. If we ever are able to get a male in, we're looking at closer to 16 feet.
I know the record, they stated a record of 22 feet, which, certainly there are exceptions, but this can be a pretty large animal. Now, this very unique slender snout, because they will eat a variety of different fish and mammals and whatever, so it actually probably works to their advantage. They can probably hunt some things that the bigger crocs can't. What's their main diet, and what diet do we feed here?
Well, their main diet in the wild is going to be fish. Like you said, that long, narrow snout really helps with the hunting aspect. Makes them very aerodynamic in the water, able to catch things very efficiently, especially with the teeth that they have and their snapping power. But here in captivity, we offer a little bit more variety. Although fish is their primary diet, we do mix in things like rodents and horse meat to add extra protein or calcium into the diet.
Now, I understand you're doing some training with these. Can you talk about what kind of training you're doing and for what purpose?
Oh yes, the training we're doing is awesome. It's mainly for the focus of getting them spot trained if we ever need to do any type of work on them, but it's also for us to be able to get a good bird's eye view of them, make sure each one of them is eating properly, gaining weight, and to look them over for any possible medical conditions. So the way we do it is we step out to the front of the exhibit and we ring a dinner bell. And all the crocs jump on into the water, and they're up at the front because they heard that bell. That's their conditioning. And so then we walk into the exhibit, and when you look behind you, you can see that there's outlets into the exhibit. So we put 4 people out there, 1 on each outlet, and we have the crocs come up to each one. And we only feed them when there's 1 at each of those stations. If they bother to try to double up and get 2 in there, we step away, make the crocs leave, and when it comes back to 1 per, we go back to feeding them.
I mean, we've talked about training in many other segments, and what's important about this is it allows us to manage these animals more effectively. We can look at them medically on a regular basis, and it's less stressful for the animals. So, you would think, wow, training a croc, why would you want to do that? Well, for the very purposes that Sean was talking about, it allows us some great access to these animals. You don't want to just be going in the exhibit when there's a problem, because the animals will react obviously negatively to somebody being in their environment. So transfer these animals from 2 institutions cross country, which is always a challenge for all that, special crates, specially designed crates, so that they transfer and get here in good shape. And then we put them in quarantine for a little bit. Did we? And then the transition in the exhibit was any issues with that, or go pretty good?
The transition was very smooth. The one croc that came in from San Antonio, we moved her directly to the exhibit, and as you mentioned, we had the other 3 off holding. So once she was in, we grabbed those ones 1 by 1 and moved them in there. That way they could all establish into the enclosure at the same time. They do have a tendency to be slightly territorial, so we didn't want to put either the individual in or the 3 in before the individual to get any type of dominance on that territory.
It's all very carefully orchestrated again. So the next time you're at the zoo, come on down past the Love Garden, headed towards the Bird Amphitheater, and on your right you'll see one of our new arrivals, the Orinoco crocodile. We're now in front of the Sandhill Crane exhibit as you enter the Florida Boardwalk, and I'm with Kristen again, and over our shoulder you'll recognize the 2 larger birds. Those are sandhill cranes. You see them in your backyard. The bird with them is a demoiselle crane chick. And how this happened was that the demoiselle cranes that we have here in our Asia area produced an egg. And it's their first, and they didn't know quite what to do. So we took the egg and gave it to these 2 female sandhill cranes to incubate and raise. And sure enough, they did. And now we have this demoiselle chick being raised by these 2 female sandhill cranes. That was just fantastic. Great thing. It's called cross-fostering, where you give another species the opportunity to raise, a like subspecies of that family. So this must have been a great day when you saw that chick hatch. Huh?
It's pretty fantastic. He hatched out on the 25th. And then these guys have actually been laying eggs for about 8 years, and they've been infertile. So it was a really good idea, and it turned out pretty well. So.
And you said he because we have sent the feathers in, right, for DNA testing. Was it feathers or blood? I can't remember.
I believe it was blood.
Blood. We did blood testing so we can determine the sex, and that's important to know, obviously, so that we're putting them back together in the right pairings again. So I've watched these two sandhill females, and they have been just very protective of this chick. They obviously think it's one of them, but you can see the difference in this bird. Now that sandhill, the sandhills, pretty good sized crane. Demoiselles won't get that big. And what have you were just feeding them a little while ago. What were you feeding?
These guys eat a variety of different things. They're omnivorous, so they eat vegetation as well as bugs and small rodents. So today we had some waxworms as well as some mealworms for them, and it's one of their favorites, so they enjoyed it.
And you still see the females are feeding the chick. They still think, hey, this is my duty to do that. Now we'll remove this bird pretty soon, put it back with the parent birds, but we're waiting for it to be fully feathered to have that happen. Now, interesting about demoiselles, they live in Eurasia, and they'll actually go as far as China and into Mongolia and then mainland India. They also migrate. Part of the population goes into Africa, part of the population goes into India. But in their migration, they've got to go over the Himalayas. And they have been sighted as high as 24,000 feet in the air. Now just think about what that's like if you're flying in an airplane, that you could see a bird off your wing as part of the migration pattern. Very difficult migration for a bird of this size. And it's just spectacular to see that. But again, they migrate back and forth seasonally for nesting and then raising their chicks. Any interesting parts about going in with these? Has it been a challenge, I should say, going in with these two adults?
They're definitely very protective of the chick. Keepers have been telling me that they go in and they're calling the whole time. They're very protective, just very defensive about their chicks.
So the next time you're at the zoo, you'll probably see this chick in our Sulawesi aviary, but it was raised over in Florida with two sandhill cranes. We're in the Discovery Center, and if you look just over my shoulder, you see a Komodo dragon who's just over a year of age. And I'm with Sean, who takes care of this little guy. And Sean, tell us the history on this animal.
Well, this is, like you said, the Komodo dragon. It comes from the Komodo island chain, which is in Indonesia, Southeast Asia. This is a very, very cool lizard because it happens to be the largest reptile on the planet. It's known for various things, and not just in its size, but also the intensity in which it can eat is one of the main things. They are thought to be a venomous lizard, and although they have found venom sacs inside its jaw, what it's mainly known for is the bacteria that it contains in its saliva. It has dozens of strains of Staphylococcus and E. coli, which can eventually cause gangrene, and that's how it's known to take down its prey items.
Well, this is an interesting topic because it's been thought that originally it was all the toxins and the bacteria that were causing the death, and probably is a big part of that, and then this recent discovery of these venom sacs. So either way, you're going to be in trouble if you get bit by one of these guys. And again, the point is they bite their victim and then wait for it to die and then consume it. And these animals, people live in the area where Komodo dragons occur, and I think there's been some exaggerated accounts of them actually chasing people down, even though they can move pretty fast when they have the initiative to do so. But you'll watch them hunt, and they actually ambush, I think, more than in any other way, their prey. And it is a very slow death, obviously, for the victim. But again, the adult male we have weighs approximately what now?
He's just around 150 pounds right now. He was a little bit heavier than that, but we put him on a diet.
Everybody needs to be on a diet. And so this little guy will get up to that weight eventually. Now, he will be the beginning of our new population of Komodo dragons, which, by the way, in the country is still struggling. We're still struggling to produce enough to help support the conservation of this species, but it's, again, another one that we're dedicating our resources to because, again, perfect climate for it nonetheless. I mean, this is, very typical of where the Komodo dragon lives. But these animals can also swim, can't they? They're pretty good swimmers.
Yeah, they can be very good swimmers. That powerful tail that they have works really well in the water. It can help push them along at 10 to 15 miles an hour or faster.
And if you thought you could climb up a tree, they're also pretty good at climbing trees too. So be careful of that. If you're ever in Komodo, you just have to be fast. That's basically it. So understanding that what an adult eats, what do we feed this little guy?
He gets a little bit more varied diet. Since we try to do training with him, we mix it up between doing baby rodents. We'll also do some fish, and every once in a while we'll do chicken or horse meat with him as well.
And all of our animals, we have a preventative medical program here where all of our animals will be assessed at about a 2-year rotation by our vet staff to make sure they're healthy, make sure we're staying ahead of any issues, and that's a very important part of how we manage this collection of over 1,600 animals. Any interesting little tidbits since you've had him that you'd like to relay to our guests?
There's been a few occasions where he gave us a little bit more attitude than we thought we would get from him. They have a tendency to be very, very territorial, and particularly when they're this small, they're food for everything, including other Komodos. So once that door opens, he kind of gets on edge. But like I said, we've been doing some training methods with him that have really started to cut back on that type of aggression, and we're looking forward to making him a more social lizard.
Social lizard. So what would be an average clutch size for a female Komodo? How many eggs would she lay?
I believe it's somewhere around 30 to 40 eggs per clutch.
And probably a halfway decent, at least hatching rate, but survivability, of course, they're on their own after that. Mother really doesn't tend to anything, and so they, as Sean said, can become food for something else. So it's not easy being a Komodo dragon. So if you're in Komodo, now you know a little bit about Komodo dragons, and next time you're in Discovery Center, stop by and see our little guy. Now, he eventually will be on our main exhibit, but he's a little too small to put out there right now. So come out to the zoo pretty quickly so you can see him in the Discovery Center. Thank you for joining us today on Wildlife at Tampa's Lowry Park Zoo. See you next time.